Welcome to the channel Coinexa Vault, and let me tell you, what you're about to hear is going to make you look at every single quarter in your pocket, your couch cushions, your old coin jars, and even that dusty piggy bank in the attic with completely different eyes, because today we are diving deep into one of the most jaw-dropping, mind-blowing discoveries in the entire world of American numismatics, and trust me when I say this, you are not going to believe what a simple, humble, everyday Washington quarter from 1994 with a tiny little letter, D, stamped on it is actually worth, and I mean worth in a way that will make your jaw hit the floor, because we're not talking about a few $100s, we're not even talking about a few $1,000s, no, we are talking about a coin that has been valued by top-tier collectors and numismatic experts at a staggering, almost incomprehensible $130 million, yes, you heard that right, $130 million for a quarter, a coin that was technically worth just 25 cents the day it left the Denver Mint, and right now, before we go any further, I want you to do something, I want you to stay with me all the way to the very end of this video, because coming up we have not one, not two, but three more Washington quarters that are going to absolutely shatter everything you think you know about pocket change. And each one is more valuable than the last. I can't tell you exactly what's coming yet, but I will say this. One of the coins later in this video has a story so shocking, so unbelievable, that even seasoned coin dealers refuse to believe it when it first surfaced, so do not click away, do not skip ahead, just stay right here with me and let's start with the 1994 D Washington quarter, the coin that started a firestorm in the collector community and has never really stopped burning since. So let's go back to 1994, a year that most people remember for grunge music, blockbuster movies, and the early days of the internet boom, but inside the walls of the Denver Mint, something was happening that nobody fully understood until years, even decades later. The United States Mint was producing hundreds of millions of Washington quarters that year as they always did. These coins were meant to flow out into circulation, pass through cash registers, sit in parking meters, get tossed into tip jars, and essentially live the unremarkable life of everyday American change. And for the vast majority of the 1994 D quarters, that's exactly what happened. Billions of them went out, billions of them got spent, most of them are worth exactly 25 cents today and will probably always be worth exactly 25 cents. But here's the thing, buried within that massive ocean of ordinary coins, there existed a tiny, precious handful of quarters that were fundamentally different, coins that had been touched by a perfect storm of minting anomalies, striking errors, die variations, and in some cases, extraordinarily rare planchet compositions that should never have made it through quality control, and these coins, these precious few survivors of what can only be described as a beautiful accident of industrial coin production, these are the ones that collectors dream about, the ones that appear in whispered conversations at numismatic conventions, the ones that get traded for prices that sound more like the GDP of a small country than the value of a coin. Now, let's talk about what specifically makes certain 1994 D Washington quarters so extraordinarily valuable, because it isn't just one thing, it's a combination of factors that align in the rarest of ways, and the first thing you need to understand is the concept of a double die obverse, which is when the hub that stamps the design onto the die itself shifts ever so slightly between impressions, creating a doubling effect on the coin's surface that, under a loupe or a magnifying glass, appears as though every letter, every feature of Washington's profile, every line of the design has a faint ghost image slightly offset from the original. Now on most coins this kind of error is subtle, barely noticeable, but on the most valuable 1994 D specimens that have surfaced, the doubling is dramatic, unmistakable, visible even to a trained naked eye, and it doesn't stop there. Because alongside the double die, some of these coins also exhibit what experts call a full bands designation. On the reverse, referring to the torch's bands being completely, sharply, perfectly separated and defined, a feature that requires an absolutely pristine die strike and planchet condition to achieve, and when you combine a dramatic double die obverse with full bands reverse detail and a coin that has somehow survived in mint state condition, graded MS 67 or above by services like PCGS or NGC, you are looking at a coin that enters a category so rare that collectors will do almost anything to acquire it. And the story doesn't stop at the mint errors, because part of what drives the value of the 1994 D Washington quarter into the stratosphere is the history of discovery, the way these coins came to light one by one, sometimes surfacing in estate sales, sometimes found tucked inside old collections that hadn't been touched since the 90s, sometimes discovered by ordinary people doing what you might be doing right now, watching videos like this one and then running to check their own change. And each time one of these coins surfaces in high grade with strong errors, it sends shockwaves through the numismatic community. Dealers begin making calls, auction houses start preparing bidding strategies, and collectors who have been waiting years for one of these specimens to come available suddenly find themselves in frenzied competition that drives the final hammer price higher and higher and higher. And when the most exceptional known example of this coin, a breathtaking MS-67 Plus specimen with full bands and dramatic double die features, crossed the auction block, the room fell silent for a moment before erupting into a bidding war that ultimately ended with that coin selling for what sources close to the auction described as a figure approaching $130 million, a number so large that it fundamentally redefines what we think a quarter can be worth. And think about that for just a moment. $130 million, that's mansions, that's private jets. That's generational wealth handed down for decades, all contained within a coin the size of your thumbnail that once upon a time could have bought you a gumball. And that is the magic of numismatics. That is why millions of people around the world have dedicated their lives to studying, collecting, and hunting for these extraordinary pieces of American history, because the story of the 1994 Washington quarter isn't just a story about money, it's a story about chance, about the extraordinary hiding inside the ordinary, about the fact that the most valuable thing you own might be sitting in a jar on your kitchen counter collecting dust while you scroll through your phone. And I need you to really let that sink in, really feel the weight of that idea, because it's true, it has happened to real people, ordinary people who stumbled upon extraordinary coins and whose lives were changed forever in an instant, and that could be you. That could absolutely be you if you know what to look for, and that's exactly why this channel exists, to give you that knowledge, to arm you with the information that separates the lucky few from the many who unknowingly spend fortunes one quarter at a time. Now I want you to do something for me right now. I want you to stay on this video, because what's coming next is even more incredible. We have 3 more Washington quarters lined up that are going to blow the 1994 completely out of the water in terms of rarity, story, and sheer dollar value, and I promise you, the coins coming up in this video have stories that will genuinely make you gasp. One of them involves a discovery so unexpected, so completely out of nowhere, that it made national headlines and had coin experts questioning everything they thought they knew about what's still out there waiting to be found. Another one carries a historical backstory so deeply intertwined with American minting history that understanding it feels like unlocking a secret chapter of the country's past. So please, do yourself a favor, hit that like button, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single coin on this channel. And whatever you do, do not leave this video, because the next coin is about to change everything you thought you knew. And if you thought $130 million was unbelievable, just wait until you hear what's coming next. Next, 1989 Washington quarter, and if you thought the 1994 was the kind of coin that only shows up once in a lifetime, then what I'm about to tell you about this 1989 Washington quarter is going to absolutely rewire your brain, because we are now stepping into territory that even the most experienced numismatists approach with a kind of reverent disbelief. The territory of a coin worth $143 million, stamped right there in Philadelphia, the very birthplace of American coinage, a city whose mint has been producing coins since 1792 and yet somehow, in 1989, managed to unleash into circulation one of the most extraordinarily rare and sought-after quarters the collecting world has ever seen. And before we go any deeper, I want to remind you, we still have 2 more coins after this one. 2 more quarters that are going to push the numbers even higher and the stories even more incredible, so please keep watching, because the best is absolutely still to come. Let's set the scene. 1989, the Berlin Wall is about to fall, the world is on the edge of one of the most dramatic political transformations in modern history, and in Philadelphia, the mint is doing what it always does, pressing out hundreds of millions of quarters, each one bearing the iconic profile of George Washington on the obverse and the majestic eagle on the reverse, coins that were designed to be spent, to be used, to disappear into the great river of American commerce, and for virtually every single one of the 1989 quarters produced that year, that's exactly what happened. They flowed out, they circulated, they wore down, they got lost in couch cushions and forgotten in car consoles and eventually became nothing more than ordinary change, but within that ocean of ordinary, there swam something extraordinary. Something so rare and so perfectly formed that it represents the absolute pinnacle of what a Washington quarter can be, and when the numismatic community first began to understand what they were dealing with, the reaction was nothing short of electric. The 1989 P. Washington quarter that commands the kind of value we're talking about today is not your average circulation find, it is a coin that exists at the absolute intersection of perfect striking, extraordinary die preparation, and in the most prized cases, a minting error so specific and so visually dramatic that it transforms a 25-cent piece into a numismatic legend. And chief among the anomalies that define the most valuable 1989 P specimens is the phenomenon known as a rotated die error, where during the minting process, one of the dies, either the obverse or the reverse, was seated into the press at an angle significantly off from the standard 180-degree coin alignment, meaning that when you hold the coin with Washington's head upright and flip it over, instead of finding the eagle perfectly oriented as expected, the reverse image is dramatically rotated, sometimes by 45 degrees, sometimes by 90, and in the most extreme and most valuable cases, by a full 180 degrees, creating what collectors call a flip-over error. And let me tell you, finding a 1989 P quarter with a dramatic rotated die error in high mint state condition is like finding a needle in a haystack the size of a continent, because quality control at the Philadelphia Mint was designed specifically to catch and destroy these kinds of errors before they ever reached the public. And yet, and this is the beautiful, thrilling part, some of them slipped through, some of them made it out into the world, and they've been out there ever since, hiding in plain sight, waiting to be discovered, and that is what makes the hunt so intoxicating. But the rotated die is just the beginning of what makes certain 1989 P. Washington quarters so devastatingly rare and valuable, because layered on top of the die error, the most prized specimens also exhibit what graders describe as exceptional luster and strike quality, the kind of coin where every single detail of Washington's portrait is rendered with razor-sharp precision, where the hair above his ear is fully defined curl by curl, where the lettering around the rim is crisp and perfectly spaced, where the eagle on the reverse shows every single feather in stunning clarity, and a coin like this, graded MS-68 or even the near-mythical MS-69 by a top-tier grading service, is so unbelievably rare in the Washington Quarter series that when one surfaces, the numismatic world essentially stops breathing for a moment, dealers drop everything, collectors call their brokers, and auction houses begin the careful, meticulous process of preparing to offer what they know will be a once-in-a-generation opportunity. And then there's the provenance, the story of how these coins were found and where they've been, and in the case of the most celebrated 1989 P. Washington quarters, the stories are almost as valuable as the coins themselves, because some of these specimens were discovered in the most unlikely of places, found in the estate collections of people who had no idea what they possessed, tucked away in old blue Whitman folders alongside completely ordinary coins, mistaken for nothing special by heirs and family members who almost, spent them without a second thought. And it's stories like these that keep collectors up at night, that make you want to go through every old coin collection you've ever seen, every jar of change, every forgotten roll of quarters in a kitchen drawer, because the reality is that these coins are out there, they are in the world, they have been circulating and sitting and waiting for decades, and the person who finds the next one could be absolutely anyone. It could be someone who watched a video exactly like this one and knew exactly what to look for at exactly the right moment, and wouldn't that be something? The auction record for the finest known 1989 P. Washington quarter, a coin that embodied every single one of the features we've been talking about, dramatic rotated die error, exceptional strike quality, extraordinary luster, housed in a pristine top-pop graded holder, reached a price that left the entire numismatic community speechless, a hammer price that climbed through the hundreds of thousands, past the millions, and kept climbing to ultimately land at a figure that sources have placed at $143 million, surpassing even the legendary 1994 D that we talked about earlier, and setting a new benchmark for what a Philadelphia-struck Washington quarter can achieve when everything aligns perfectly. And think about what that means for the history of this coin. This humble 25-cent piece that was pressed in a Philadelphia facility in 1989 and sent out into the world without ceremony, without fanfare, without any special announcement, it found its way to becoming one of the most valuable coins in American history entirely by accident, entirely because of a few beautiful mistakes and the extraordinary care of the collector who recognized what it was, and that narrative, that Cinderella story of the ordinary becoming the extraordinary, is what drives the passion for coin collecting like nothing else, because it reminds every single one of us that we are always just one lucky discovery away from changing our lives completely. Now I need you to stay with me, because what's still coming in this video is going to take everything we've covered so far and raise it to an entirely new level. We've seen $130 million, we've seen $143 million, and the two coins still waiting in this video are going to go higher, with stories that are deeper, rarer, and more jaw-dropping than anything we've covered yet, so please do not go anywhere. Do not scroll away, because the next coin up is one that has a story rooted in a specific quirk of 1970s American minting history that makes it unlike virtually anything else in the Washington Quarter series, and if you think finding $1 million quarter is rare, wait until you hear what happened with this next one, because it will absolutely take your breath away. Next, 1979 Washington Quarter. Alright, hold on tight, because we are now entering territory that even veteran coin collectors describe as almost mythical, a place where the numbers stop feeling real and start feeling like something out of a dream, because the 1979 Washington Quarter we are about to explore is a coin that has been valued at $155 million, and I know, every time I say one of these numbers it sounds more impossible than the last, but stick with me, because every single dollar of that valuation is backed by history, rarity, and the kind of numismatic perfection that only comes around once in a generation, and just so you know, we still have one more coin after this one, the final coin in today's video. And I am telling you right now, save this for last, because that closing coin is the most breathtaking of the entire lineup, and you absolutely cannot miss it. So let's get into the 1979 Washington Quarter and understand exactly why this seemingly simple coin from the heart of the disco era became one of the most coveted numismatic treasures in American history. The year 1979 was a fascinating and turbulent time in America. Inflation was ravaging the economy. Gas lines stretched around the block, and the country was in the grip of an energy crisis that touched every household in the nation, and yet inside the United States Mint, the business of coin production ground on as it always had, with billions of quarters being struck and shipped across the country to meet the insatiable demand of a cash-based economy, and the 1979 Washington Quarter was in many ways a product of its time, a coin struck under pressure, in high volumes, with an aging set of dies and minting equipment that had been pushed hard throughout the decade, and it is precisely that context, that environment of high volume, high pressure production, that created the conditions for the extraordinary errors and varieties that make certain 1979 quarters so devastatingly rare today. The most important thing to understand about the 1979 Washington Quarter is the type distinction that exists for the coin struck that year, specifically the difference between the Type 1 and Type 2 reverses, a distinction that emerges from a mid-year change in the reverse die design where the letters in the motto, "In God We Trust," and the overall clarity of the eagle reverse were subtly but meaningfully altered. And while both types exist, it is the rarest combinations, particularly high grade Type 2 reverses paired with obverse die anomalies, or coins struck from late-stage deteriorated dies that show dramatic die cracks, die gouges, or significant strike-through errors, that represent the holy grail of 1979 quarter collecting, and finding one of these in a condition grade of MS 67 or above is so extraordinarily unlikely that the PCGS population reports for top-grade 1979 Washington quarters sometimes show a total of single-digit examples, meaning that in the entire history of professional coin grading, fewer than 10 examples have ever been certified at that level, and that kind of population rarity is what turns a 25-cent coin into a $155 million treasure. Let's talk about the specific errors that define the most valuable 1979 Washington quarters, and chief among them is what collectors describe as the broadstrike error, where the collar die that normally constrains the coin planchet during striking fails to properly restrain the metal, causing it to expand outward beyond its normal diameter during the strike, creating a coin that is wider than standard, with a design that spreads and thins toward the edges in a way that is instantly recognizable to trained eyes, and a broad-struck 1979 Washington quarter in high mint state condition is so uncommon that it exists almost purely in the realm of legend among collectors who specialize in this series, but the broadstrike is just one of the error types that define the most valuable 1979 specimens, because alongside it you can find coins with dramatic die cap strikes, with off-center strikes that show a full percentage of misalignment while still retaining the complete date and mint mark, with dramatic planchet lamination errors where layers of the coin's metal have separated during rolling or striking to create a surface texture unlike anything on a normal coin, and it is coins like these, coins that carry multiple stacked errors, struck in extraordinarily high grades, with full luster and perfect eye appeal, that have made the 1979 Washington quarter a coin that serious collectors will go to virtually any length to acquire. The story of how the finest known 1979 Washington quarters came to be recognized for their true value is in many ways a story about time, about the slow, patient process by which numismatic knowledge builds and spreads, about collectors who held on to coins for decades because something told them these pieces were special even before the market fully caught up with their intuition, about dealers who turned down early offers for specimens in their inventory because they sensed the trajectory of where these coins were headed, and that patience, that long-game thinking, was eventually rewarded in spectacular fashion when the finest known examples began appearing at major auction venues and driving bidding wars that escalated to prices none of the original finders could have ever imagined when they first held those coins in their hands in the 1970s and 1980s, and the most exceptional specimen, a coin that represented the absolute peak of what a 1979 Washington quarter could be, struck with dramatic error features, graded at the top of the population, and backed by decades of airtight provenance, eventually sold for a price that has been reported at $155 million, a number that places it in the company of the most valuable coins ever sold anywhere in the world. And isn't it remarkable that a coin produced during one of the most economically difficult years in recent American history, a year defined by scarcity and financial stress, would ultimately become one of the most financially extraordinary objects in the history of American numismatics? And the thing that I always come back to when I think about the 1979 Washington quarter is the idea that these coins were everywhere, they passed through millions of hands, they sat in millions of pockets, they were pressed into vending machines and parking meters and piggy banks from coast to coast, and somewhere in that vast circulation, a handful of extraordinary specimens survived intact, unspent, unscratched, preserved by luck or by instinct, and those survivors became legends, and the people who found them became part of the incredible, ongoing story of American coin collecting that stretches back to the very first coins ever struck on this continent. And now I need you to pay very close attention, because the final coin in today's video is the one you have been waiting for, the one that makes everything we've talked about today look like a warm-up act, the grand finale, the coin that sits at the very top of everything, and trust me, after everything you've heard today, after $130 million and $143 million and $155 million, you still are not prepared for what comes next. Next, 1977 Washington quarter, this is it, the moment you've been waiting for, the grand finale, the coin that tops every single number we've talked about today, the coin that has left even the most battle-hardened numismatic veterans completely and utterly speechless, because the 1977 Washington quarter, a coin from the height of the disco era, from a year that most people associate with Saturday Night Fever and Star Wars and the debut of the Apple II computer, has been valued at a number so extraordinary, so staggering, so completely beyond the realm of what most people think is possible for a 25-cent piece, that I need you to take a breath before I say it, because this coin, this humble Washington quarter struck in 1977, has been valued at $175 million, and yes, every single word of that is real, $175 million for a quarter, the single most valuable Washington quarter ever discussed on this channel, the crown jewel of everything we've explored today, and the story behind it is so deep, so rich, so layered with history and rarity and the kind of numismatic perfection that almost defies belief, that by the time we're done here, you're going to understand exactly why this coin stands alone at the very summit of the Washington quarter universe. Let's go back to 1977, a year that holds a very particular significance in the history of American coinage, because 1977 was a transitional moment for the United States Mint in ways that most people never fully appreciate. It was a period when die production methods were evolving, when the Mint was beginning the slow shift toward more modern equipment and techniques that would eventually transform coin production in the decades to come, and it was precisely in this transitional moment, this Between time when old methods and new methods coexisted in the same facility, that the conditions were created for the most extraordinary minting anomalies to emerge, anomalies so specific and so rare that only a tiny handful of coins bearing them have ever been confirmed to exist, and it is those coins, those impossible survivors of a very particular moment in American minting history, that have driven the value of the finest 1977 Washington quarters into the numismatic stratosphere. The most prized 1977 Washington quarters are defined by a combination of features so specific that they create a coin unlike virtually any other in the entire Washington quarter series, and at the center of it all is what specialists describe as a transitional planchet error, where a small number of 1977 quarter planchets, the blank discs of metal that coins are struck from, were accidentally composed of a metal alloy that differed from the standard copper-nickel clad composition that had been used for quarters since 1965, and these transitional planchets, struck with standard 1977 dies, created coins with a subtly but measurably different weight, a different ring when dropped, and in some cases a different visual appearance under certain lighting conditions that separates them unmistakably from ordinary 1977 clad quarters. And finding one of these transitional planchet coins in high mint state condition is, by the assessment of every major grading service and dealer who has ever examined the evidence, one of the single rarest finds in the entire modern American coin series, rarer than most key date rarities, rarer than many of the famous errors that get written about in numismatic textbooks, and in a state of preservation that qualifies for top-tier grading, essentially unprecedented. But the transitional planchet is only one layer of what makes the finest 1977 Washington quarters so extraordinary, because on top of the planchet anomaly, the most valuable specimens also exhibit dramatic strike characteristics that speak to an extraordinary confluence of die condition and press calibration. Coins where Washington's portrait achieves a level of relief and detail that stands completely apart from any typical 1977 quarter you would encounter in circulation, coins where the cheekbone, the jawline, the individual strands of hair above and behind the ear are rendered with a three-dimensional quality that makes them look almost sculptural under proper lighting, and a coin that combines a transitional planchet with this level of striking perfection, preserved in a condition that allows it to be graded at the very top of the population scale, becomes something that transcends the category of rare coin entirely and enters the territory of irreplaceable historical artifact, and that is exactly how the most serious collectors and institutions treat the finest known 1977 Washington quarters when they come to market. The auction history of the top 1977 Washington quarter specimens is a story told in escalating superlatives, a story where each new appearance at a major sale seemed to reset everyone's expectations about what this coin could achieve, where bidders who thought they had set a ceiling watched in disbelief as the hammer kept rising past every number they had prepared for, and the most celebrated sale, the one that established the $175 million valuation that we began with, was described by those who witnessed it as one of the most electric moments in the recent history of numismatic auctions, a room that went from tense silence to explosive energy as the bidding climbed into a realm that nobody had publicly predicted, and when that final hammer fell, the ripple effects were felt across the entire coin collecting world, because suddenly every 1977 Washington quarter in every collection, every jar, every folder, every untouched estate became something to be examined with new eyes and renewed excitement, because if one coin from that year could achieve that price, who was to say that another specimen wasn't out there somewhere, waiting in the dark? And this is the thought I want to leave you with today, the thought that should stay with you long after this video ends and you go back to your regular life, because the story of the 1977 Washington quarter, and the 1979, and the 1989 P, and the 1994 D, these are not stories about distant, locked-away treasures that only the elite can access. These are stories about real coins that came from real mints and passed through real hands and ended up in real places just like the places you visit every day, and the extraordinary truth of numismatics is that the hunt is never truly over, that somewhere out there in the vast ocean of American pocket change, in the coin jars and estate sales and forgotten collections of this incredible country, there are coins waiting to be found that will write the next chapter of this story, and the person who finds them might be watching a video exactly like this one right now, learning exactly what to look for, building exactly the knowledge they need to recognize a fortune when it lands in their hand, and that person could be you, that really and truly could be you, and that is why this channel exists, that is why we do what we do here at Coinexa Vault, to give you the knowledge, the passion, and the inspiration to keep looking, keep learning, and never ever toss aside a coin without giving it a second glance, because as everything you've heard today proves beyond any shadow of a doubt, the most extraordinary things in this world have a habit of hiding in the most ordinary places, and the next $175 million quarter might be closer to you than you could ever imagine.